Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another week of Verify and Field, the Millwork podcast. Today is a special anniversary episode. We're giving you clips from our top episodes from the past year. We've just passed our first year as a podcast. So a year ago in May, we started this podcast. We started bringing you interviews every week, every Wednesday, with experts in the millwork field, all about millwork, from engineering to project management to new exciting products and processes to recruiting, people problems, all of the above. And today you're going to see some clips of some of our top episodes that we've had so far in year one. And next week, we'll be back bringing you new episodes, new interviews with industry guests. So make sure to subscribe, follow, like whatever platform you are consuming this podcast on. We are on all of them. And come back next week for a new one. And I hope you enjoyed this recap of some of our most interesting interviews this year, in year one.
Welcome to Verify in Field, the Millwork podcast. Your host, Jacob Edmond, CEO of Ductworks, will be interviewing experts in the industry to bring you insights and knowledge about the latest trends, techniques, and challenges in millwork. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just starting out, this podcast is for you. So sit back, relax, and join us as we explore the world of millwork. Here's Jacob.
Awesome. And so within that, obviously, we're talking specifically about, okay, how do engineers and PMs work together effectively? But I think it's important. We've laid a bit of the groundwork of, okay, what is the context of what should a PM do? And as we're talking about this, that's the role we're talking about of what makes a good PM. So you outline here also communication, and within that, drilling in a little bit to that, what are some of the kind of methods, whether it be processes or tools or things that usually come to mind with communication, and how you coach and manage your team to communicate effectively?
I agree. I think diving into these with your viewers' mindset in mind would be the next step. And then really giving you guys some tips on what to do, takeaways on how to go home with this information, because that's usually where you struggle. Is, oh, this all sounds great. You built, I think you said, Jacob, this perfect PM, but how do I take something tomorrow? So obviously communication is really centered around if the PM's ability to anticipate things before they happen is the best response that you can expect to see out of your PM. If that PM is not anticipating what's going to happen and just reacting to it, we've got a problem on our hands. And that's usually where the frustration builds. And so really thinking, again, I'm going to split this off into two things, just like I set up, is drafting and engineering. This means a clean set of drawings are given to you before you ever start, right? It's gone through its scope, anything's X'd out, it's taken some extra care, if you will, and is put out there. They're trying to anticipate all the things that you might come across before you ever come across them. How many times have a PM that your listeners have dealt with doesn't even think that they've looked at the drawings at all? They know the good ones, and the good ones are going through it. From an engineering focus in our world, again, post-process or near processing, post-approval, that means really all the RFIs that have changed that from the start to now are documented correctly, and that it is accessible for your team to get to. So it's that clear communication that this changed, here's the new directive, please proceed with this. It also means getting clear field dimensions that are written down for them in a consistent way that isn't on 10 different, I'm not looking for data on 10 different documents. I'm centralizing it all to one, and they're taking that time to make your job the most efficient, right? It's that spoke of that wheel, if you will, and putting all that information together. Those two intersections of RFI and engineering need to meet. So I will say that is that. So that all sounds good, but what do we do with that? I'd really challenge your listeners to start writing, really identifying what works for your company. Again, scale is a part of the equation here, but really make sure all your managers, assuming you have multiple, are doing it similarly every single time. You don't want to get it from Joey one way and Bobby and Sue another way. It's not the way that is going to make anybody successful. You guys can drive that more than you guys think. You are a customer of them, and you can set expectations to say, hey, I need it this way. I would also suggest this is a world that things are happening fast. Architectural drawings are not as clean as they used to be back in my day. I sound old at this point, but things are changing. And I would say that given the ability to have that web-based live, whatever you want to call it, that I can get this information while I'm on site or even at home or wherever, traveling on the road, to get it to the team that I know that they're going to see it. So web-based services are all over there for drawing management, file management, all that stuff. But you need a way to get that ability to get that information into a centralized location. So there's, again, Jacob criticizes me. I might have a plan grid. I might as well have a plan grid polo on because he criticizes me for that. Obviously, I'm a big believer of, it's still plan grid to me, but it's technically called Autodesk Construction Cloud now. I'm an energy user as well, and Teams. Those are great services that are out there that we use at Adam.
I gravitated more toward the people who had no cabinet experience and were buying cabinet businesses and putting together a leadership structure or a leadership team. And really, they didn't know anything about how things need to happen. So they depended a lot on those managers and their experience. And so I lean more toward that model. And that's how we've tried to grow Caseworks.
No, I think that's good. We didn't touch on something you mentioned there yet, but you are also involved in the North Carolina chapter, or the Carolinas chapter of AWI. You're president of it or chair of it?
Currently the president of the Carolinas chapter AWI. Yep.
Yep. And also, you guys are energy users, so I know you're very involved in the energy user community and stuff. Even though you mentioned like you haven't worked yourself in a lot of shops, you are very much involved in interacting with a lot of other companies in this industry in a multiple different kind of avenues through those in particular that I'm aware of, at least.
Yeah. And that's what I found tremendous value both in energy and in AWI. And I would probably say more so in energy, just because I think that most of the energy family are more progressive. For energy to work, you have to buy into the idea of how a business should function and change management. And that's a really great group to be involved in. And I've learned a lot and made a lot of great connections through both those organizations.
And they're by nature, I mean, they're a software company, an ERP company, software for this industry specifically. Everything they do is around the business practices, the processes by nature, whereas AWI is first and foremost more about the products we make. You talked a little bit about your path, which I think is honestly very common for a lot of people in this industry. Let's talk a little bit about what the typical path to management or leadership looks like in millwork. And you touched on this a little bit, but a lot of times it's not planned. It's not something that is orchestrated or architected in any way. It's out of necessity or just, hey, there's nobody else, and I either am a business owner or I need somebody to help fill this role, and you get pulled. The business owner pulls that person in because they're the most tenured or most experienced. But that also leads to some of what we're seeing today, which is a lot of underdeveloped leaders and managers are under-equipped. Right. I'd say this industry is, like a lot of people say, and it's true for me as well. Nobody kind of goes to school and says, oh, I'm going to go into the millwork industry, unless you go to Pitt State maybe. Yeah. But a lot of us find ourselves here through life circumstances. And as such, there's not a lot of opportunity where it's like, hey, I'm going to go and be mentored and coached to be a millwork leader, to be a millwork manager. Talk a little bit about that and how the typical path kind of leads to what we see today.
Yeah, I would say the majority of leadership in the millwork industry are people who started on the sawdust side. They wanted to do construction or manufacturing work, and they were good at it. And so they've been promoted up through and find themselves in a leadership role. And most of who they were coming up under probably weren't pouring a lot of training and stuff into them, and maybe weren't a good manager at all. Right. So I would say a lot of the example that's been set and for people is not positive. I would say the generation or two ahead of me coming up were not gentle teachers. There were a lot of throwing things and cuss words, and you learned the hard way. And then you've got the people who are entering the industry from other businesses and stuff that I think are having a positive impact on leadership in general. And then with what AWI and some of the other organizations are doing, they're recognizing that's an issue.
Find a listing that doesn't tell you they're a staffing agency.
Yeah.
They needed somebody to do shop drawings, and when I wasn't doing that, they were teaching me how to make doors and how to swing routers and how to mill lumber and all that stuff. And so I realized, oh, wow, I'm drawing it one day and then next week we're building it and then we're installing it. And it was like, that's the satisfaction I was looking for. And
Yeah.
I didn't see a path. Like I came from an educational environment where it was like, hey, this is how you become an architect and there's a path to success. You're not going to make a ton of money, but maybe you'll be that rock star, but you'll be fulfilled. And then in woodworking, it was, what is the career here? And, but I saw, okay, I know.
Turns out there has been quite the career though, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can't complain, but I made a conscious decision at one point of, hey, I don't know what this is, but I want to figure out how to make a career out of this. And there wasn't a company that laid it out for me and was like, hey, if you stick with us here, you can be engineering manager and then maybe you can be this. It tends to be in these millwork companies. Okay, if you start in the shop and everybody else says you can't really do any of these other roles unless you have shop experience. You need to know what we do before you can engineer it, before you can project manage it. That's like the stigma and the belief of the industry. And so everybody aspires to, hey, I'm going to do my time in the shop or in the field to eventually earn my spot being a carpet walker, and I can sit in air conditioning and then earn that higher wage, get on salary. Maybe I'll be a project manager, and that's it. Most companies, though, are owner operated, and it's unless you're that guy's right hand man until the owner or him dies or the son, well, there's not really a way to aspire to much higher than that level in most companies. But I was young and arrogant enough to think, hey, maybe I can forge a trail and figure out how to make a career out of this. And so I took the engineering path and was like, hey, I see parallels in other industries. But from there, once I became an engineering manager, I realized, okay, I need people that are going to want to do a good job. And how do I get people? I've got to figure out how to create. Even at Mortensen, I was engineering manager, and I very actively was, how do I make this a destination shop was my mindset of, okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes that means having the mindset of people might come here to work here as a launching pad to get somewhere else. And I have to be okay with that and keep that pipeline going. And that mind shift has always been hard for owners and a lot of people because there's that fear of, I don't want to invest in somebody and then somebody's going to steal them. But that 100% holds people back from investing in their people and creating a culture of, I want to go work for Millworks by Design because I've seen people work 5 years there and either they end up promoting and gaining skill and getting status or whatever they're trying, their career path, or maybe it is a temporary thing and they move on to something better, which is positive as well.
I think that culture piece that you just mentioned is an important ingredient to providing the kind of environment that attracts A players, attracts people with the right kind of work ethic or values. The component that as an owner, and I remember when I had to get over this and change my mindset about it. Today, I'm proud of the fact that there are Millworks by Design alumni, let's call them, out in the industry who had a great experience with us or learned a lot during their tour of duty with us, and who are now out there building value in other places. Sometimes those people even turn into our clients. They go to work for general contractors and we end up. And so I think that owners have to get over the scarcity mindset. Oh, everybody who I hire needs to stay here for their entire career. Right. Of course, we want to have long-term people or we want to have longevity, but it's naive to think that you're going to keep everybody that you hire. And so why not do the industry a favor and invest in everybody? And some of them are going to stay and continue to help build the operation here. And some of them are going to be launched into other careers. And to the extent that we can launch as many people out and have a positive impact on our industry, I see that as a net gain.
Yeah. Sometimes I think, I don't know if you follow football at all, but it's in other sports, I'm sure, but I know in football, there's this idea of a coaching tree.
I'm not familiar.
And people will trace the lineage of Don Shula had this coach that was under him, and then he went and eventually got his own team. And so there's a certain
like assistant coaches working with certain head coaches and then moving on to become head coaches on other teams and almost like a lineage.
Yeah. And with that, it's the opposite mindset that we have with, all these people that worked with me have left. And I think a lot of people think of, hey, if we have this minuscule turnover rate, we're doing really well. But most of the time, if I walk into a company and they're like, hey, we've got all the same people we had 30 years ago. Wow, you've got no growth. You've got no improvement. You've got all the people doing the same things the same way you've done. Yes, you don't want to have high turnover, but if there's no turnover,
It could also be a bad indicator too.
And for me, like I look like similar to what you're saying. I've got people that have started as a drafter and an engineer and moved up. Now they're managing their own departments and they're going to far exceed what I do in my career. And that's exciting. That's a point of pride. And
there's a personal satisfaction in that too. If they can look back at the time they spent with you as the leader and the mentorship that you were able to provide, like you probably had a huge impact on their career going forward.
Yeah. And having that person, so bringing this, I guess, full circle to training and development. So I think a lot of times it's scary to think, okay, I'm going to invest in this person and then they might move on. So part of that is always having to somewhat a pipeline of talent. And that means you also have people at varying stages of their development and their learning and their growth. And through that, I think we always think of, are we developing people that are basically eventually going to be masters of what we need them to do? But the reality is we have tasks and responsibilities in our company that require varying levels of experience and skills. And so if you end up with all master carpenters, eventually you're going to have nobody that really wants to sweep the floor, and that you can't afford for them to be sweeping the floor or anything in between. But also sometimes you might have somebody that comes in for 2 years and find, hey, they're not the fit. And we've already been developing somebody behind them. And we've developed a culture that shows that, hey, you can come here for a couple of years, learn and move on. And that attracts, that basically has that effect of it develops the pipeline for you. People see Millworks by Design as someplace I want to go, even if I only spend a year or 2 or 3 years there. It's going to be a good experience. I'm going to gain experience. And that attracts me to want to apply there, to go spend time there.
There's a lot that I didn't expect. I think probably the most unanticipated challenge with getting into the woodworking industry, not being a woodworker, is the complexity of the industry. We primarily service the commercial institutional markets, heavy on tenant improvement, which spans a pretty broad range of medical, office. It's very complex. You and I, when we had a chance to talk at the AWI convention in Phoenix, talked about the complexities of it. And so I think the biggest challenge is when I came on board, it's kind of like, oh, this is a construction business, thinking of the install side of the subcontractor portion of the business. Oh, this will be easy. I know it. I'm servicing the same customers that I've serviced. I've been a general contractor. What I undervalued or underappreciated was the manufacturing component to what we do and the complexities therein. And so I've learned a lot. I think a friend of mine once told me, who owns his own shop, you don't really feel like it's yours until about 5 years in. And I didn't know that at year 1, year 2, year 3. I'm 4.5 in, and it's starting to feel like it's ours. And really influencing that change, figuring out what parts of the business need to be worked. My history before here certainly has played a critical role in the overall understanding of the industry. There's a lot of guys in the industry that have come from the general contracting background, and I think that's very important to understand how projects work at a base level, how they're designed, how they're put together. Like you, I think you had mentioned in a podcast I had watched, you always thought you wanted to be an architect. I think a lot of people want to get in the industry from that. And I wanted to be an architect too. My dad was a general contractor and had architects on staff. And so I always wanted to be an architect. So I do have a love for the industry. And, there's nothing more fulfilling than see a raw piece of dirt turn into something amazing that's going to be there for 100 years plus potentially. So it's very fulfilling, but I've learned a lot, and there's a lot still to learn.
Yeah, for sure. In your journey through acquiring a shop and entering an industry or a niche of the construction industry that you weren't in before, are there any specific resources or friends or people that have been instrumental in that journey of learning? You mentioned you have a friend that's a business owner. We met at the AWI convention. I'm sure you've met a lot of contacts through that. What has been invaluable to you in that your learning journey and understanding the complexities of this industry versus what you thought it was?
That's also been another challenge, because having not come from within the industry and having a group of peers that I was working with or communicating with or even had contact with, I didn't know who the competitors were in the market when I bought the company. We bought into the energy platform pretty early on. Within 6 to 8 months of me me coming on board, we made the switch to energy, and giving them a good plug. They do a great job at the peer-to-peer communication behind the scenes stuff, which is extremely valuable. So that's been of my gateway into creating some relationships within the industry. Of course, having friends and peers that own other businesses certainly has added a lot of value to what I bring to the table, but still working on building some great relationships. Like you said, meeting many other people and bouncing ideas off one another. I am fortunately and unfortunately put the cards on the table. I like to get to know people and know processes and know systems. And I think that's important in being able to be vulnerable and share my story with people and challenges and in hopes that I can benefit somebody else. And then also have them benefit me. I've learned a lot, certainly from, some industry professionals that have been very helpful in contributing to the success that we've had.
Awesome. Do you find that there's anything that you have leveraged, or maybe not even consciously, your experience before Millwork and coming in as an industry outsider? From my perspective, I find a lot of people who've spent their entire career in this niche industry have some ego. I've got the experience, I've done it, and what we do is very hard. And you probably got some response like, yeah, you think this is easy. It's just like a construction company, but right?
Totally.
Was there some humbling or an ability to be humble that has been valuable for you? And like, hey, look, I'm learning, I'm new to this, I'm willing to learn, versus maybe somebody who would come in and just insist, hey, this is easy, I can do it, and fall on their face?
Very much. I think it's a two-way street. I think the advantage of me not coming from within the industry has given me a whole different view of the industry as a whole. And of course, like we mentioned earlier, it's been very eye-opening to the complexity and the working parts of the business. But we're one of the only subs and trade suppliers that actually has to manufacture everything before we install it. And so obviously that adds a whole different level of complexity on top of things. But I think one of the advantages I have not being a woodworker is I don't get bottlenecked up with the woodworking.
I went to school for architecture, but if I were to go back again, I've always said I would love to do software, computer science, if I knew then what I know now. And similarly, getting into engineering, the software side of things is what really piqued my interest and what I enjoyed the most. And so for you, obviously having a background in that, in this industry, I imagine early on you were, was that what drew you towards engineering a lot? Was the software and the kind of the programming side of things, the problem solving, I guess, more so?
Yeah, the problem solving is a lot of fun. Software, obviously, but a little more than that. So at that first woodworking shop, I wrote an ERP, right? Enterprise Resource Planning, just purchase orders, time clock, tracking parts type stuff, because we needed one. And there really wasn't one that we could find. Again, kind of, early 2000s, late 2000s maybe. And I ended up sharing it with 20, 25 shops were running it at one point. And I really engineering ended up being a nice central place where you could make changes to organizations. Engineering is positioned perfectly to be a change management. And you've seen this yourself in your background. We've had this conversation before. And I think that's what brought me there more than anything, is that was the right place to introduce new ways of doing things.
Yeah. And in most millwork shops, still to this day, engineering kind of becomes the de facto IT department, it seems. Because most millwork shops are smaller, don't have an IT staff or an IT person. But also those engineers are the ones interacting with probably the largest spectrum of software in the company. And it seem to be the minds that get it the most, or maybe just we screw with things the most. I don't know, but yeah, I found that in my experience as well. Everywhere I went as engineer and then engineering manager, it was like, okay, you're the IT guy as well. And I think that does make sense, or at least in practice, how it works out is you're kind of the one who's able to, they go to, hey, we need a solution for this. What do you think we could do? As well as you kind of have your hands in the most things to be able to affect change.
Yep.
Kind of drilling into that though, because from my experience, especially over the last year and a half, I've been consulting with a lot of companies and we work with a lot now, and you even more so. what are some of the common, I guess, pain points, problems you've observed specifically around engineering that that people sort of like, because everybody engineering is a pain point. I guess we'll start there, right? Everybody's kind of every owner that I talk to, it's, well, if I could get more through engineering, I could get more through my shop. My shop has untapped capacity, right? Or I could sell 10 more million, but I can't get the shop drawings or get it through engineering to get it to my shop in time, or some version of that, right? And everybody has a little bit of that. Or on the flip side, hey, I've got all this knowledge tied up in this one person, this engineer that everything's dependent on. I can't multiply them. I can't replicate them. What do you find is kind of some of the core reasons for that? And I know energy, you guys, paired with the software, obviously, is an operating system and a way to attack this. But in your experience, I know you've solved these problems in a number of ways at different companies. Can you talk a little bit about your thoughts on that and your philosophy around engineering?
Sure, as long as I warn you ahead of time that you're about to get me up on my soapbox, and I can be kind of hard to get back down off of it. So, if you're open for that, then I will spew molten, philosophy at you. Yeah, so you do hear this all the time from companies. Engineering is our bottleneck. Engineering is our bottleneck.
So that's what, like, from my experience, at least, like, especially on the commercial side, a lot of the struggle with progress is that, like, preconceived or prior experience of, hey, well, we at some point we decided to do it this way, and there was a valid reason for it, but maybe those reasons don't apply anymore. And so a lot of the times it's really the people change management that's harder than actually getting the software up to date, getting the machine up and running. It's hey, look, or you're going to change the way you think about things, and a lot of the things that were constants before no longer apply. Or we've now got new information, new processes, new software, new things. So, do you find that?
I think too, I want to just add to that it's a lot easier when you have 2 employees to 10 employees than when you have 50 to 200, right? It's those types of changes. Those shops are generally a lot more agile and can do that. Whereas it's a lot harder to change on a large scale. But no, I think you're right. I mean, and this is not a shot at the industry, but I do think that there's a lot of old thinking. There's a lot of resistance to change, and I'm sure this industry is not unique in that. But it's nice seeing there are a lot of younger people in the groups that are building up shops, and it's nice to see them come at it with a fresh perspective. That kind of like you mentioned earlier, if I had started in another shop versus if I started on my own, this is one of the things that who knows how that would have gone. Because if that shop hadn't changed in the last 20 years, I'm learning 20-year-old ideas, and so.
Yeah, it's funny. I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, having run a shop and now worked with a ton of them. Because for the longest time, I've always heard it said is that there's a very low barrier of entry to just start a cabinet shop and be a cabinet guy. That's kind of been like the thorn in the side of good shop owners that have been around forever, right? It's like, oh, well, I'm constantly competing at price against some guy with a table saw and a shed. Do you think that is still the case? Do you think that the advent of, software and CNCs has lowered the barrier of entry? I guess is part one of the question. And part two, do you think that, or maybe it's made it harder, right? Now you have to compete against shops that are more advanced. But also, do you think that that kind of idea is still the case, or it's going away? There's more serious people that are starting shops versus just, hey, I'm going to start and low bid a bunch of jobs and then I run out of business.
Right. No, I mean, I think, that will never go away. But I think as a shop owner, you got to kind of hang your hat on that, knowing that you're going to win the long game. It's not, to me, it's not about this bid today, which is easier said than done when you're staring at a pile of bills, right? But, if you focus on the long game, price your work competitively, but to market value. That's another thing I just want to take a tangent on. And I think a lot of small shops are unfortunately costing themselves a lot of money because they still try to price things on time, material. And it's good to know those numbers, but really, yeah, the market you're in is willing to pay a certain price for what you make. And you got to figure out what that number is. And then to me, it's working backwards to make sure you're doing it profitably. Because if I'm in Nashville, like the hottest market, like right now, people are paying a lot of money for cabinetry. But if I'm in the middle of, Iowa, I'm not getting that price, and I might be making the same thing. And so it's really understanding your market that really drives a lot of that. But I think that software has lowered the barrier to entry in a way because, I look at my path, like I didn't know anything about cabinetry, and once you can, for young people who are, grew up with computers and software, it's really not very difficult to learn. And I'm just, of course, speaking about Mosaic, but I'm sure others are somewhat similar in that you can kind of, work your way through it just on being young and computer literate, I guess, from the beginning. And, so you can, I think, achieve some things that maybe in the 90s would have been a lot harder starting from scratch. But CNCs, have never been more affordable. Software's never been more accessible. And I think that the barrier to owning one is as low as it's ever been. When you look at the payment on a CNC versus the cost of an employee, I mean, it's not really even close.
Smartsheet is an online work management platform. This is a platform to get a group of people to work together more efficiently. The PMO journey tends to evolve pretty naturally at most companies. When companies start out small, the people delivering the work are the same people that are doing, or the same people that are managing the work. And eventually, as the companies start growing, it's like, hey, we need a tool in place. Everyone has Excel basically downloaded on their laptop already, and so it's like, oh, hey, let's put it in a grid here, and we can kind of track stuff. And that was a standard for quite some time. And Smartsheet said, hey, wait, we can really take this above and beyond. What if we were able to roll this information up into dashboards and deliver information to the right people? What if we were able to send automated notifications on that? So they took a very similar look and feel to Excel and then just built on all this functionality to really take that project management and work management concept and deliver a tool that is right now market leading.
Right. Awesome. And there's one other acronym or abbreviation you mentioned there that I think will be helpful to define: PMO. What is PMO?
Oh, that's a great question. And that can be a little bit ambiguous sometimes. People kind of throw the word PMO or the acronym PMO around. It stands for Project Management Office. And usually what that ends up being in a defined sense is the group of people and the tools that are managing work for an organization.
Makes sense. And, a lot of our listeners, maybe they're in millwork companies and they have project managers, right? And almost every industry has some form of that. And what PMO is more than that. It includes those people most likely in your organization, but it's really the group of people and the tools they use. And unfortunately, still very common, at least in our listener base, I would say, is whether consciously or kind of hidden behind the scenes, a lot of that does still happen in emails and Excel, right?
Yep.
And I'm sure you encounter this a lot, right? And even if companies maybe adopt something like Smartsheet, or there's other, similar tools out there, Airtable and even Excel Online and things where they have some of those features, right? It's like, hey, we can collaborate and it's cloud-based and this stuff, right? But even if there's people that are using Smartsheet, a lot of times they're really just using it like Excel Online. And that's not leveraging it for what it's really intended for or what it's best at. And so what I mean by that is a lot of people are just still kind of living siloed in like, well, I have my sheet, I mentioned earlier, my side sheet of like, hey, I'm migrating it from my desktop in an Excel file to this online place, but it's still just segregated, siloed information.
Yep.
And I imagine that's a lot of where you're working with clients is maybe, and if anything, I would say maybe is one of the benefits of, especially an enterprise organization use of Smartsheet, is you can audit that, you can see all that, you can manage all that from like an admin perspective, right?
Yep.
So I guess now bridging into the next stage of the conversation, and for those listening, we mentioned earlier, everything we're talking about, if you have an ERP, don't tune out yet, because I guarantee you have cases of what we're talking about in your organization, even with an enterprise ERP system, and a need for something like this in pieces of your business. So as you engage with companies, you full-time now, Ketke Consulting, you have a team and you're working with clients on their use of Smartsheet. Maybe they're already using it and they're engaging you how to improve it or implement it. What does that look like? And what are some of the most common kind of low-hanging fruit things you encounter when you're consulting with clients?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And one piece that I want to add on that I think you mentioned that was really interesting is about defining a PMO. And every company has a PMO, whether you realize it or not. Sometimes that's just one person on the team who decide, hey, I'm going to throw this together in an email and send it out every Friday, updating our progress. That could be a PMO. You could also have a formalized team of people that are specifically doing that. And where you are on that process is going to depend on kind of what those low hanging fruit look like, and what you can what you can do and where to get started. A lot of people, when they first come to Smartsheet, they are coming to Smartsheet because they are using Excel, and every project manager has their own sheet that they're tracking who's doing what, and they get together every week for a big meeting, and they all spend this time updating a big PowerPoint that's got version control issues. And hey, we pulled up the PowerPoint for the meeting, but my details aren't in there yet. And they say, okay, we need something better.
You can make really, really good money in millwork and in any of the trades. I was recently in Austin, Texas, and they have a program. It's called the P-Tech program. And when you are in 8th grade, you can decide whether to go into this program, and then it's a welding, specifically for welding. So if you go into the P-Tech program, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, you do these welding classes. And by the time you graduate high school, you're a certified welder. And, you could go in the labor market making $30 an hour, like right out of high school. I mean, things like that are going to be really vital to get people not only interested, but better educated about the monetary rewards, the personal, rewards of being a tradesman. So I think that's kind of concerning over the next 5 to 10 years. And then of course, financing. Millwork is a high capital expenditure industry. So we do, we make a lot of money, but then we spend every bit of that money on machinery, and with the interest rates and whatnot, and the
So you
technology
alluded to
getting
this, but I
more and
want to talk a
more,
little bit about
needing more and more technology even
your
to
company
compete.
culture, because I know this is something that
I do. I mean, I worry about
are
new
very
firms,
intentional about, and you guys do a lot of
being
really
able
great work
a new
for your
entrepreneurial
culture. But related to what
person
we were talking about before,
trying to get into the
your
industry.
growth
I
as
mean, that kind of
CEO,
money, and then
I'm
going
curious
into
how
crazy
much.
debt to get there, and
Obviously,
then
they go
that's
hand
just
in
so
hand,
risky
personal
as
growth
well.
and
And
team growth and culture,
I
right?
mean, that part's is
But do you
concerning as well.
feel that like your personal growth has
Again,
influenced how
Robert, my
you
father, is
approach culture,
just
or do you feel like
super
your
on
need
top
for
of
the
things. I mean, we're debt free other than the
culture
building. We
has
always have been. We pay.
motivated you? Like, oh man, I need to
You
grow
can't buy any cash.
personally,
You can't
or
afford
is
it.
it a little of both?
So we don't have any notes on any of our machines. We bought $500,000 in machines last year, just in cash, and we hadn't bought any for many years before that with the COVID. wasn't very wasn't very profitable, but yeah, that is also kind of troubling. Just how to get people in the industry, or if they want to start their own millwork firm, that's a lot, and I feel it's really tough. It's going to be really it's just going to get tougher.
Mhm.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah, it's great for existing companies, but we want new blood. I mean, you can't, and we can't do this forever either, right? So yeah, and not to beat a dead horse, but I mean, I think the people, I think AI and machinery are going to be great supplements to the things we do and help, make us more efficient. And but I think people are always going to be there. I just don't really see. I could be wrong, but I don't really see robots building cabinets and 100% building cabinets anytime in the foreseeable future, anyways. So I think people are always going to be a part of this. I think they should be. I mean, I think there's a certain uh, I mean, that's what makes it cool, right? Somebody made this with their hands. I mean, yeah, machines cut the parts, but someone put this together with their hands, and they sanded it, they made it look perfect, they painted it, all the things. I mean, that's what's kind of really neat about the woodworking and seeing that finished product, and yeah, it's super rewarding. And I think people are going to stay involved. I think they need to be involved, and I think we need more of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Great point. And then, of course, that's just the cabinet side. We also the trim and the millwork, the paneling, all that. That's definitely not going anywhere.
One thing that I've done recently with a client, and so far it's been very successful. Instead of pairing with that new entry, that apprentice, that recent graduate, with that veteran, and saying to the veteran, I want you to mentor this newbie. We went the other direction. We asked the newbie to mentor the veteran on how to adopt technology and use a knowledge transfer tool to extract the knowledge. So what the newbie did was go in with this knowledge of technology, with this knowledge of software, with the knowledge of everything that you and I are using to speak right now, right?
Yeah.
And sat down at a computer with this 25-year veteran and said, hey, here's this program. We need to extract all of your knowledge and put it in there. I'm not going to ask you to do this, but what I want to hear is I want to know all of your knowledge. So literally, the newbie sat at the computer, transcribed, wrote, brought drawings in, did all that kind of stuff. The veteran is actually mentoring this young person without even knowing that they're mentoring, right? But at the same time, you're capturing all of that knowledge from that veteran for future new hires to then be able to digitally mentor the next hire and the next hire and the next hire. So it's all there in your system, right? Instead of having to say, hey, you're going to mentor this person. That being said, I do highly recommend using that older generation, that baby boomer generation within your facility for mentors. But not everybody's built to be a mentor, right? Yeah. And it's as leaders being able to identify, okay, which one is my good mentor? Which one has amazing amounts of knowledge that we need to extract? And pairing the people together well, and it's an art in itself, is making sure that you're pairing those people together. But I'm a big advocate of making sure that sometimes you're going to have the younger person mentor the older person on technology versus having the older person mentor the younger, if that makes sense at all.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is also feeds into culture, because if those later career individuals, one, have insecurity for their position of like, I'm going to transfer all this knowledge, and then what value do I have here, right? Like, that's a culture problem. That's a business problem, right? And so I see a lot of that of like, well, this is my job security, is my knowledge. Why am I going to give this away? And two, yes, a lot of times it's those individuals are just not equipped to transfer knowledge. Yeah. They're not teachers. Yeah. They're not managers. They are individual contributors. They've been that their whole career. And there's a ton of institutional knowledge, but they've never been equipped in how to teach and mentor somebody that. And so a lot of the most stuff that I've learned has been through weathering the storm through those individuals of like, hey, look, I have to go above and beyond to get this knowledge from you. And some of it's by taking lashings, some of it's by watching, but like not everybody is going to be that persistent to get through that. Right?
Absolutely.
And so the most successful organizations I've seen are the ones that have institutionally built in to their culture, transferring knowledge, process, driving process. And like, we educate our people. We can onboard somebody with entry level experience or none. Yep. Hey, you guys have the raw talent. We're going to teach you what you need to know. Yep. That's how Boeing, that's how auto manufacturing, that's how all of them do it. But the rest of us, the majority of the industry, the smaller shops, focus on people. Yeah. We're dependent on people. And unfortunately, we don't realize it until that person's about to retire, how dependent we are on those people.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Do you want to stay up to date about industry insights, new content, and our community of millworkers? Go to ductworksmw.com to sign up for our newsletter. I'll see you in the next episode of Verify in Field.